All right, the time is 6:31. It is April 27th, 2023, and I call this meeting to order for the Planning Commission meeting. Would everyone please rise and pledge the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Nicole, roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Altman?
Present.
Commissioner Goff?
Present.
Commissioner Mohammed?
Present.
Chair Malari is absent this evening. Vice Chair Cruz?
Present. Okay, moving on to public comment. This time is reserved for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of interest that are not on the agenda and are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. It is recommended that speakers limit their comments to 3 minutes each, and it is requested that no comments be made during this period on items on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items on the agenda should comment via email prior to the start of the meeting or to verbally comment on the item during the meeting. Click the raise your hand button if joining by computer, or press star number 9 if joining by phone when the item is called. The Planning Commission is prohibited by law from taking any action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda, and no adverse conclusions should be drawn if the Planning Commission does not respond to the public comment at this time. Speakers are asked to please speak clearly and provide their name. At this time, I open public comment. And my first speaker today is Ivan Baginski.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Yvonne Baginski, and I spoke last time on the idling issue, and today I see that it's going to be continued, so I'd like to address another item that's not on the agenda, and that is I am a outdoor enthusiast of the land south of 29 to American Canyon. I walk those properties and those fields quite often, and I've been doing it for 35 years. And when I look at all of the development that's planned and all the development that's going on, both in county and the city of American Canyon, one of the things that has really come to mind for me is that every bit of land from this side of 29 over to American Canyon is slated for development, every single bit of land. There is nothing that's being left for the wildlife. There's nothing that's being left in corridors. And I just want people to be aware that all that land that's been zoned was zoned 35, 40 years ago. And it was done by people who aren't even sitting on these commissions anymore. And the times have changed. And I will say that when we talk about the dearth of animals, when we talk about the dearth of wildlife, what we're really seeing is a cumulative effect. These animals have absolutely no place else to go. And that area is all dedicated. You'll see the commercial real estate signs up on the properties. You'll see the buildings. But that goes from Highway 29 all the way through to Vallejo. So there is no land set aside for the wildlife. You've got your wetlands edge here, but nothing inland, and everything is being looked at for development. And I just want to bring that to your attention because a lot of us have taken these beautiful views and these open spaces for granted, and those of us who walk out there have seen a lot of the wildlife. And when they do the biological reports, I always go, how can they go out there and do a biological report on nesting when they're out there in December? Who's nesting in December? And they say there's no evidence of this bird. So I've been very carefully reading these reports, and I'd like all of you to just really pay attention to the wildlife issue on these properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Are there any public comments? Any other, Nicole?
I'm going to call for Zoom. If there's anyone on Zoom who would like to make public comment, please raise your hand. And nobody's raising their hand, so no more public comment.
At this time, I close public comment. Moving on to agenda changes for the consent calendars and commissioners, have you had a chance to look at the minutes of March 23 of 2023?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the consent calendar.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Altman,
Aye.
Commissioner Goff,
Aye.
Commissioner Mohammed,
Aye.
Chair Malari is absent, Vice Chair Cruz.
Aye. Okay, moving on to the annual 2022 General Plan Annual Progress Report.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cruz. It was actually a consent item, and it was presented for your information only, and it was included in the consent calendar.
Okay, well, for the record then, the 2022 General Plan Annual Progress Report has been received and filed. Moving on to public hearings. I call first for the public hearing, Chicken Guy. Staff, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is William with the Planning Division. So for the Chicken Guy Restaurant project, staff is recommending a continuance to the next available meeting because the project required a traffic impact report, and the applicant has announced that they could not provide that report in time for the staff report this month.
Thank you, William.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to note that there, like all matters on the agenda, if additional communications are received after the time that the agenda goes out, they are published online, so they're available for public review, and there are hard copies of those documents available for public review. So with respect to this item, even though it's being continued, there is an additional communication that concerns an advice memorandum to the commission on the standards that are applicable to Chicken Guy that is available for both public review online and for any member of the public that's here present. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Ross. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion to continue the Chicken Guy for next agenda.
I will be happy to make such a motion that we continue the Chicken Guy Restaurant conditional use permit application until our next regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting.
And I second.
Roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Altman,
Aye.
Commissioner Goff,
Aye.
Commissioner Mohammed,
Aye.
Chair Malari is absent, Vice Chair Cruz.
Aye. Okay, moving on to the next public hearing, we have the Sun Square Mixed Use Design Permit. Staff, please.
Awesome. Good evening, Vice Chair Cruz, members of the Planning Commission, and members of the public. My name is William. Happy to give a presentation on the Sun Square Mixed Use Project. So here's an outline of the agenda. I'm going to talk about the location for the site, some of the planning and zoning information. We have some photos from the applicant, and we have a site plan for the project and also some site-specific issues. And as always, we have staff's recommendation and explanation of how this project complies with the CEQA. So to begin, here is the location map of the site. The site is shown in the yellow box, and it is at 425 Napa Junction Road, to the east of Highway 29. To the north of the site is the Canyon Ridge Apartments, and to the direct west and south is the Walmart Superstore, and then to the east is the vacant lot that's owned by the fire district. The main entrance is from Napa Junction Road. So here's some of the planning and zoning information. The site is in the community commercial zone, and it's about 1 acre, and the applicant is planning to develop it in 2 phases. Site access is from Napa Junction Road. Currently, there are 2 underutilized single-family homes, and this project is going to be one of our first vertically mixed-use projects in the city. So they will have offices on the bottom and then residential units on the top. The project consists of 4 2-story buildings, approximately 27 feet tall each, and there will be 20 dwelling units per building, and about 7,800 square feet of office, all spread together. The dwelling units are all single-bedroom units that range from 616 to 750 square feet. And of those 20 dwelling units, 3 will be affordable and will be deed restricted for affordable housing. The site includes 40 parking spaces, 20 uncovered and 20 covered, which also has solar photovoltaic systems on top. Interestingly, this project will have shared parking, which they will explain. Well, I will explain a little bit in the later slides.
Vice Chair Cruz, if I could just interrupt for a second. William, I don't think you noticed, but you said 20 units per building. It's actually 20 dwelling units overall for the whole project.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. 20 dwelling units overall, and it's 5 units per building. Yeah. Thank you. So here's some site photos of the site. The photo on the left is the site frontage facing east, and then the photo on the right is the frontage along Napa Junction Road facing west. So on the right side of the right photo, you can see the Canyon Ridge Apartments. Some more photos from the inside. This is the one on the left is site facing southeast towards Walmart, and then the one on the right is a site facing southwest towards Walmart. And then this third set is site facing the east of the property line. You can see one of the single-family homes, and then on the right is site facing the north along the west property line. And then the last set, we have just photos taken from the public right-of-way. The one on the left is the vacant fire district property, and then the one on the right is the Walmart parking lot. Here's the overall site plan. There are 4 primary buildings that is proposed. The site is pretty much a rectangle, and the property line is shown in the dotted red. The entry is from Napa Junction Road, and each building includes 5 dwelling units. It's 4 on the second floor and 1 on the first floor, along with the office suites. The applicant is proposing to develop this in 2 phases. The first phase includes the area shown in yellow, which is about a parking lot for 13 parking spaces and building 1. So phase 1 will include building 1 and 13 parking spaces. Here's a more descriptive explanation of the phasing plan. So phase 1 would include the demolition of the existing buildings, construction of building 1, construction of 13 parking spaces, and construction of the building pads for all of the buildings. They won't be doing the buildings until phase 2. This Phase 1 includes landscaping, the installation of Napa Junction Road frontage improvements, and hardscape and undergrounding for Phase 1. They will have a trash enclosure for Phase 1, but they will relocate it in Phase 2. And for Phase 2, it will be basically the full build-out of the site, buildings 2, 3, and 4, 27 of the remaining parking spaces, and the completion of landscaping improvements and undergrounding of utilities. Here is a diagram of their landscaping plan. The site will include 42 new trees and approximately 14,600 square feet of landscaping. The landscaping will be irrigated with recycled water. The main species of the trees will be Armstrong maples, Oklahoma redbud, crepe myrtles, and Chinese pistache. One of the issues that the staff saw in the site was that there seemed to be a lot of trees on the site, and we talked to the applicant about perhaps identifying which trees would be removed, and they did get a specialist to analyze the site, and it turns out a lot of the trees were actually not even on their site. So here's a diagram of the tree removal plan. The circles shown in yellow are off-site trees, and then the trees on-site are shown in green. None of the trees that are being removed are protected by any federal or state laws, and they've explained that some of the trees are either unhealthy or dead, and some of the other trees is just conflicts with their site plan. So there's no way to save any of them, but 19 trees will be removed, and 42 new trees will be replaced for the new landscaping plan. Here are some of the building renderings. So the building will be developed in the modern style, brick surface, which shows a natural weathered appearance. It has a hip roof, functional balconies, and kind of like industrial style windows, the large open windows. And the applicant's architect is here if you have additional questions about the architecture. So I'll pause a bit just before we get into site-specific issues. Any questions on the project so far, or ready to keep going? Okay, sounds good. So traffic and parking. So this is one of the first mixed-use projects that I've dealt with. And so traffic is very interesting here. The project for the 20 units and 7,800 square feet would require 61 parking spaces according to the American Canyon Parking Code. However, because due to the limit of spacing, the applicant is proposing 40 parking spaces. So it's a request to reduce 21. One of the reasons that they've provided, well, first of all, they provided a traffic and parking study, and the explanation is this shared parking principle, where the residential parking demand drops during the day when office demand peaks. So if you see, take a look at the chart, we have basically the yellow shows the office parking, and then the gray shows the apartment parking. So in the morning when the folks that live in the apartment leave, the office people come in, and so they kind of share the use of the parking. They've explained that if they used shared parking, they can make the site feasible with 40 parking spaces. So there will be no assigned parking spaces, then the allocated parking. All the parking is first come, first serve, and the applicant is required to record a parking management plan, as well as make sure the shared parking is part of a deed restriction to the site. So here's kind of like the numbers that we looked into. The top part is just phase one. So if we just look at one building and about 1,950 square foot of the office, then the requirement would be 16 parking spaces in accordance to the municipal code, which is actually more than the ITE parking code. Sorry, it's been a while since and the ITE parking code actually says it would be okay with 14. With shared parking, the reduction goes to 9, and the applicant is proposing 13 parking spaces for phase one. For the full build-out, the requirement is 61 parking spaces, and the ITE rating is 56, and the shared parking actually brings that down to 38, and the project is proposing 40. So that's how the project will make this work. And the next site-specific issue is overhead utilities. The Broadway-specific plan, this project is, even though it's a community commercial, it's in the Broadway district, requires the undergrounding of utilities adjacent and on-site. So there are 2 utility poles on site, as you can see on this diagram, and they're about 140, it contains about 140 linear feet of overhead wires. Interestingly, this is the last 2 of 3 overhead utility poles east of, not west, east of the Highway 29, because most of east of Highway 29 was Napa Junction. They're all developed rather newly, and so this is pretty much it. Once we finish these 3, the whole Napa Junction would be complete. What the applicant is required to do is to consult a joint trench specialist and get design plans on how to underground those poles, and the applicant has agreed to those conditions. Lastly, public outreach. We've done 3 outreach efforts. In January, we did an initial neighborhood letter, and then in April, we did our formal public notice, and then we had our staff report published last week. We only received 4 comments. They were all in opposition to the project, and staff actually provided responses to those comments. It's in the staff report. Their main concerns were traffic and the overdevelopment of housing. So, and we provided some responses there. So lastly, staff's recommendation is to approve the Sun Square mixed-use project, and the project complies with the Broadway District final environmental impact report, and they have their applicable mitigation measures as conditions of approval, and those have been agreed upon by the applicant. That's all that I have. The applicant and their team is here today, so if you have any questions, I'll be available.
Great, thank you, William. And I now invite the applicant to take the podium if you have anything that you'd like to add.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us this evening. I just wanted to introduce our agency to the commission. We've been around American Canyon for about 10 years. We actually started here in this building. We were occupying some of the offices downstairs. Our company name is A Bright Future, and we work with individuals with disabilities. We provide support, trainings to those who need help. Through this project, we will be able to secure a bigger space for our, not only for our clients, but also for our staff. And we will also be able to provide housing to American Canyon residents as well as our participants, and also provide jobs. We have about 300 employees, and about 100 employees live in Napa County. So I came here today to tell you guys that we've been part of a community. The community has been great to us. Our clients love the community. We have supported the cities, the schools, the church activities. And my wish is that we continue to stay in American Canyon. Thank you.
I'm sorry, sir, could you please state your name for the record?
Max Conan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max, for your comments. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments for the applicant or staff? Commissioner Goff.
Thank you, Chair. First off, I like the originality of the project. I know that piece of land's been sitting there for quite a while with the buildings on it not being used. When this first came about, I was like, okay, it's interesting, and now that I've seen the designs, I can see how it definitely will fulfill the need of a section of our community that needs housing, and at the same time, employment. The nice thing is that can be accessed in one specific site without the need for transportation or moving across. So I like the originality of the project. Just a couple of concerns. The parking is definitely a little bit of a concern for me, but that is really going to depend on the people who choose to either plant their business there or to live there. But that understanding should be very, very upfront to all of those. Because the shared parking, I can see issues arising from that, depending on who the people are who either reside there or work there. And then I'm just a little bit concerned about the density. It's an acre lot. You're planning on, 40 parking spots and 4 buildings. So I'm a little bit concerned about the density of that. I don't know, I guess the rendering didn't really ease me. I'm familiar with the size of an acre, the size of the buildings, but then I see the actual housing itself is all single bedroom studio apartment. And the one downstairs, I thought that was an interesting one as well. Again, don't know how it'll work because of the uniqueness of it. It's not something that I've experienced before, but I do see that it will fill a specific need within our community. And I think the location has been sitting there for a while, that this is a good use for that location. So I thank you for bringing this project forward. I think it does fill a niche within our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Goff. Commissioner Mohammed.
I was going to ask what type of companies you were looking at and to fill the office spaces. Bright Future is an awesome company, and I do hope that you're able to find the space for your employees. 300 employees is a lot of employees for 40 parking spaces. And hopefully the residents that move in don't work from home. So my concern too would be the parking as well, but a great idea for the mixed-use space and location as well. So thank you for doing this. Oh, one more question. One more question. The poles, it says that you're going to pay for the design plan to underground the poles. Will you pay to actually do the underground? Or?
Yeah, so let's go backwards in the questions. For the poles, the requirement is to remove the poles. So the plans is just the first step in the removal. So they have to do both.
And who would be financially responsible for putting the wires underground?
That would be the applicant as well.
Applicant as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner DeVette. Commissioner Altman.
William, this one's more for you. You mentioned that we had sent notices back in January. What was the radius? Like, how many people would have gotten them? Basically, are people living in the apartment complex, were they notified, or did that fall outside the range? Because otherwise, you're notifying Walmart and AutoZone and, you know, so.
So they're in the range, however, it's to the property owner.
Right.
So the property owner of the Reliant Apartments will get those, but not each tenant.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's to the property owner. The range is 300 feet, and they've complied with that. But in addition to the physical letters that went out for the 300 feet, we did do the agencies and also our gov delivery.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I just like to have clarity on that, because
Yeah.
it's like, you know.
Yeah.
So, okay, I appreciate that, thank you. I will, since I've got the mic, I will also comment that I'm a big fan of mixed-use properties just in general. I think they make a lot of sense in a lot of cases. I think the Bright Future operation is a good one, and I'm assuming your 300 employees are not all going to be working out of the space in American Canyon at this point. So that's it. That's what I got for you.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Cruz also wanted to point out that I think we kind of sort of, the Gov delivery notification is one that's sent out to thousands. We have subscribers for Miguel was saying, thousands of email addresses, and that was sent out to notify people of the project. They can then access our website that has all the project information and a link to provide comments. And then an equal amount would have received notification of the Planning Commission meeting. So we really do have an extensive electronic outreach effort that goes far beyond just hard copy email or letters to property owners within 300 feet. We do have on our roster of updates to update our notification ordinance to extend the radius of property owners and the like. But we've already instituted a more extensive electronic delivery of information to people who have expressed interest in the project or are already signed up to receive notification of any kinds of projects and public hearing notices in the city.
Great. Thank you, Director Cooper. All the commissioners share the same concerns I had with the density, the amount of parking and such. The only question I have for the applicant or even William would be, is there any talk about having EV parking stations as well with all the EVs we have coming into play? Any mention of that?
Vice Chair Cruz, I'm not sure if the EVs have been considered, but the building code does require parking spaces are wired for EV use. I don't think the building code has gone so far as to require them, but having them EV ready is a building code requirement.
Great. Thank you, Director Cooper. At this time, I will open it for public hearing comments.
If you would like to make public comment, please, either in person or on Zoom, please hand me a speaker card or raise your hand. There appears to be no public comment.
At this time, I close public comment. Beth. will remain open. Go ahead, Beth. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Beth Marcus. I am excited that it is a mixed-use project. That's great. I like to see more of that coming. But I agree with you. The parking just really sounds like it's going to be a real issue, depending on the type of businesses that come there. I don't know about you, but if you go to a business and you're late or you got to, and then there's no place to park, and I foresee maybe people wanting to park in Walmart. I don't know how that would work. I mean, with the people who live there, the chances of all of them being gone during the day, I mean, with it being shared, I just don't know how it's going to work out, but all power to you.
Thank you, Beth.
Vice Chair Cruz, I think William had mentioned that the parking consultant is here. It might be just worthwhile, since he's taken the trouble to come, perhaps could elaborate on the study.
Yes, I'd please like to invite the parking consultant. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Barry Bergman. I'm with W-Trans. We did the transportation analysis. And so shared parking is something that's been increasingly used, particularly in mixed-use projects like this, where the uses are complementary, and as was mentioned earlier, in the case of residential and office in particular, those uses tend to work very well together. And so I guess maybe just to take a step back, the analysis that we do for shared parking is based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers, ITE's standard parking generation rates. So it's per square foot for office, per unit for various types of residential, and then it looks by the hour of the day. So that was why that curved chart showed. So there were certain peaks. There were a couple of peaks when you actually hit the maximum. And so when ITE develops its rates, it's based on, they'll do studies on sites all around the country. What we looked at was what was the 85th percentile of the peak demand. So 85% of all of the sites that were looked at had a demand at that level or lower as the peak, which is more conservative than what we typically do. We typically use an average rate. I'm sorry.
Do you mind if I just pop back on that graphic?
Sure.
That was,
okay,
if that
great.
helps.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, as shown here, this has, at the bottom, it has the hour of the day, and you can see there's a couple of bumps in the middle of the day where that hits what the peak is. That parking supply across the top is the 40 spaces that are proposed, and there are 2 peaks during the day. What is it, 9 o'clock and about 4 o'clock when you come up close to that peak, which is at 38. It's actually still below what the supply is. So again, that's based on the average that was done through all of these studies that were collected, and those rates, and this even has a couple of extra spaces up above and beyond that. And then weekend, of course, is different because offices are typically closed, so then that leaves more spaces available for the residents on the weekends. So I don't know if, hopefully that clarifies something. I don't know if anyone has any additional questions or wants some clarification.
I actually do. If you don't mind, just trying to understand, because we've seen over, as a result really of our friend's COVID, a significant change in workforce and in the remote work from home, whatever term one prefers. So when looking at the information from the Institute, do we have a timeline as to when that was developed? In other words, is that very current information, or is that would show the impact of work from home? Or is it stuff that's, 5 years old, which isn't old,
Right.
but in this
Right.
case,
It's
it's
old.
ancient. Right. So
Right.
Yeah, you follow where I'm going.
Yeah. No, I actually had a conversation about exactly this issue with a colleague of mine who's kind of our parking expert, and I asked him exactly that question. Because he's involved in working with IT on the national level to update the things to look at, well, what has happened in the COVID era. And so at this point, they're still in the process of coming up with that. But he said that the data that they've seen so far actually shows a pretty minimal impact, and that's mainly because when you have the people that are working at home are really offset by the people who are not going to the office. So one is going up while one is going down, and so the actual net change is pretty minimal.
Okay. Gotcha.
So
That-
that's
that-
preliminary, but that's all we have to go on at the moment.
Okay. No, thank you, I appreciate that.
Any other comments by the commissioners? No other comments. Thank you, sir. At this time, I call for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the Sun Square mixed-use project design permit for development of 4 mixed-use buildings consisting of 20 apartment units and 7,800 square feet of office space on the 1-acre lot in the Community Commercial Zoning District at 425 Napa Junction Road, APN 059-020-003, file number PL 21-0020.
I will second that motion.
Nicole, roll call, please.
Yes, Commissioner Altman,
Aye.
Commissioner Goff,
Aye.
Commissioner Mohammed,
Aye.
Chair Malloy is absent, Vice Chair Cruz.
Aye. All right, moving on to business. First order of business, we have the Powley Watson Lane Annexation Draft Environmental Impact Report for public review. Director Cooper.
Good evening, Vice Chair Cruz and members of the Planning Commission and members of the public. I'm Brent Cooper, Community Development Director, and I'm joined tonight with Jeffrey Vorenberg. He's an environmental planner with Rincon Associates. Rincon is the company that prepared the draft environmental impact report for the Paoli Watson Lane annexation project. Also understand that we have Sean Kennings, who is our consultant planner for this project, is available on Zoom. And also Jesse's coworker, Leo Mina, is from Rincon, is also on Zoom as well. So we're really well taken care of both virtually and present. We're also really happy to have Ron Renata here from our Public Works Department. And if we're lucky, we'll find a question for him. But we're really glad to have Ron here as well. I think this is Ron's first Planning Commission meeting. Am I right? So and he's worked for the city for 40 years. So this is really a great moment. Okay, so moving right along. And Jesse and I are going to be sharing this presentation, so I get the easy part at the beginning to read the agenda. So we'll just be kind of reviewing things, the project, we'll explain CEQA, some of the impacts that we're anticipating from annexing this property, ways in which the public can submit comments, and what happens after this. The staff team includes our city manager, which is unusual. It kind of shows how important this project is to the city council in its priorities and to fulfilling the city's general plan. This is one of the few areas of the city that is within our sphere of influence that hasn't already yet been annexed into the city. And of course, Nicole has an enormous role with public outreach and coordination. There's a lot of work to do in an EIR to make sure that we keep all the administrative records straight, and she does a great job in helping us with that. So I'd mentioned this is in our sphere of influence, which is a peculiar term that's brought to us from our friends in Sacramento through our state legislature. Every city in California has, of course, its own city boundary, and then in some cases there's land outside the boundary that it's been acknowledged that would be logical to add into the city's boundary, and that's called the sphere of influence. So this area here is not in the city's limits, but it's in our sphere of influence, and it's been there for many, many years. And so in order to accomplish annexing this area into the city it's necessary for us to, as a city, to have our general plan updated to indicate what are the appropriate land uses for this area, because the general plan is our constitution for development. And then the next layer to implement that is zoning. And so once again, we have another peculiar term, pre-zoning. That's also brought to us from the state. And it's referring to the city's zoning land outside the city limits. Normally, we can't do that, but for purposes of annexing, you have to. It indicates this is what is intended by the city. And so it has its own special term, pre-zoning. And so for this particular area, we have the wonderful residence on Watson Lane, and then also a vacant area owned by the Paolis, no longer historically owned by the Paolis, that's vacant, that would be used for industrial use. Another goal that's very important, perhaps to all of us that drive vehicles, would be extending Newell Drive up to Highway 29. The Watson Ranch project will be extending Newell Drive quite a lot from where it ends today over at the trailhead for the Newell Reserve, but it falls short of reaching Highway 29, and so this project would help construct that roadway all the way to Highway 29 to provide a connector on the east side that allows people to be able to travel north-south without getting on Highway 29. So the area that we're looking at, as I mentioned, kind of shown here on an aerial, kind of faint, apologize for that. I mentioned Watson Lane is already kind of developed and there. To the south of that are railroad lines, and then to the north is unincorporated Napa County, where there is an application today with Napa County for an industrial development in that property. Some of the important physical features includes the North Slough. That's always very important because of its biotic significance. Usually there's setbacks from that to keep it wild and keep the whatever animals are there okay. And then on the east side, there is a parcel that's sort of right next to another extension of the railroad lines. And so there is also a small part that is on the west side, kind of triangular shaped, that has Quinlan's tires. That area is already in the city. It was part of the original city incorporation. So we kind of have this little jagged city boundary edge. One of the purposes of having a sphere of influence is to have a logical, rational city boundary. So perhaps from one perspective, it'll help straighten out the lines to make it a more logical city boundary. The other part, too, that's shown in this red line that kind of arcs across the map, and this is part of the Napa Airport planning. Of course, the city has its general plan, and the Napa Airport has its own, we'll say, general plan, but it's called a land use compatibility plan. And sort of radiating out from the airport are these different zones of influence related to aircraft, flight patterns, and noise. And so the current plan for the airport has this D zone, which is shown as the red line there. On the north side of that property, the current land use plan that the county is currently in the process of updating suggests that there are so many planes that people that would live there would be significantly bothered by the noise. And therefore, according to that plan, housing shouldn't exist and be permitted in the D zone. Of course, the Watson Lane residents have been there much longer than the existence of this land use plan. So it makes for an interesting juxtaposition. Where we're showing the larger property on the very north that's vacant, apart from an old farmhouse, is designated for industrial. And I have some maps here that show that. So the blue on the map this was how the general plan either is today or is proposed to be designated. The blue area here is industrial. The light green is residential estate. That's 1 home per acre. And then we have the railroad right-of-way. This is an area where we had the historical Napa Junction. You know, when this area many, many years ago was referred to Napa Junction, and when they're talking about Napa Junction, it's the junction of these railroad lines. So in a sense, this area here is really historic because it's right here in the heart of the historic namesake for the city. And of course, as we know, the railroad lines are still there and in active use. We do show south of the annexation area the balloon property in orange. That's already in the city limits. And of course, we have an application for apartments there. I'd mentioned that the zoning implements the general plan. So the first picture here is our general plan. And then the next one after that is the zoning. They need to be consistent, kind of working together.
Director Cooper, on the previous slide, there's one zone that the SS, the little purple way up in the far northeastern corner. Can you highlight that little area? It says special study. Right by the town center. Yeah, that guy. Need a longer pointer.
Longer. We do have an area in our general plan that is designated special study. And that is an area that is within our urban limit line. So I'm going to throw another term at you. Because we're all familiar with what the city boundary is. I described that there's an area outside the city that's in our sphere of influence. And then along the eastern side of the city is yet another line beyond that called the urban limit line. And the urban limit line was an agreement that was reached between the city and the county back in 2008 that was affirmed through an initiative that said that this is the ultimate boundary within Napa County, that agreement within Napa County and the city over our urban limit between now and the year 2030. So since that time, a lot of the area within this special study has actually been annexed into the city. Canyon Estates is one of those areas. And so when Canyon Estates was annexed into the city applied to the local agency formation commission, which is the agency that decides city boundaries, and did environmental review, amended the sphere of influence, and then ultimately annexed that property consistent with the urban limit line. One of the important components to annexing property is having consensus with Napa County, and so having an agreement with Napa County on our own local urban limit line was very helpful in streamlining the process to get agreement on annexation. This area here is technically in our urban limit line as well, but it's also in our sphere of influence, which is one step further along than just merely being in the urban limit line. But back to maybe your main question, what does special study mean? According to the initiative for the urban limit line, it designated areas as special study that are intended to become a transition between the urban city and the rural open space beyond the city to sort of feather that development. And that was one of the principles under Canyon Estates, being larger lot homes. It's sort of, you have the Vintage Ranch, which is more traditional, single-family subdivision, and you have open space beyond, and then in between you have these sort of larger lot homes. And so the special study is sort of an idea in waiting. And so I hope that helps explain that.
It did. Thank you very much.
And you probably won't want to ask me another question. Sorry for my length. So as we look at the zoning for the annexation area, up in the north there, there is a special zoning district created for this area called Paoli Light Industrial. You can kind of see that designation there kind of changes on one side of the property to the other, and that transition occurs at the North Slough. So east of the North Slough, it's sort of garden variety light industrial. And then on west of the North Slough, there's a hatched line, and that refers to industrial development as possible, but so is commercial. And the reason for commercial is because this is an intersection of Highway 29 and Newell, which makes it a great node for traffic, and that's one of the key ingredients for having a successful commercial area. What kind of commercial? There's a number of permitted and conditionally permitted uses in that area, but if you're going to generate some economic development and take advantage of an opportunity, this would be the place to do it. And then the residential estate is really our effort at reflecting what exists there today under the county's existing rules. And it's pretty much as simple as that. There is a piece on, I think I can almost reach this, on the upper right here. The blue that's labeled Town Center, that was actually pre-zoned as part of the Urban Limit Line Initiative. The Urban Limit Line Initiative not only established a urban limit line around the city, but it also helped facilitate annexation of property for Watson Ranch. And Watson Ranch general plan is Town Center, and this kind of came along with that. So it's was pre-zoned that way in 2008 as part of the larger urban limit line initiative. So it's just staying that way under this proposed project. Whenever we prepare an environmental impact report, it's important to quantify how much development might be permitted for it, and that helps evaluate what environmental impacts might result from that. And so there were some assumptions that were made with respect to residential. Under the county's current rules, the county does not permit additional residential. Now, there are state laws that supersede local authority, both in American Canyon and, yes, in the county as well. And we don't know what that means in terms of additional development. In most of the cases, when housing is built in accordance with these new state laws, the jurisdiction in which it's located doesn't have authority to require impact fees and mitigation, and it's just kind of a gimme in terms of land use. Those are state laws. I don't know if it's been litigated which takes precedence, state law or the airport land use prohibition on housing. We're not here to resolve that issue. We're simply reflecting that our effort is to maintain the status quo with respect to the residential. In terms of the commercial, there were some assumptions made about when commercial development, and this also is for industrial, how much can be built when you have a certain acreage of commercial and industrial land. And so there were some assumptions made to reflect setbacks, road alignments, creek setbacks and the like, parking and just the normal things that you look at. And so these are largely driven from assumptions about how much development could be built given the amount of acreage that's being annexed. I'd mentioned that the project also is intended to help facilitate extension of Newell Drive, and we show a part of it here arcing up along the north side. That's the sort of the orange line here. The project would have two bridges, in fact. One of them would traverse the North Slough to make sure that it doesn't impact the North Slough, so you have footings that are far enough on each side so that it bridges it. And then, of course, there's a railroad that would cross the road, and this project would provide a railroad crossing, so you just drive right over it. And so that is what the project description is referring to. Every environmental impact report per state law must have alternatives that you consider. And so alternative 2 is looking at Newell Drive with the railroad crossing being, the term is at grade, but we know what that is. That's over here at American Canyon Road and Highway 29. It's crossing arms and the like, so there's no bridge. It's crossing arms and safety for that. There would still be a bridge over the North Slough, so that's alternative 2. Alternative 4 is one that's no doubt going to be getting attention by a number of people. This one looks at kind of like a situation with what happens if for whatever reason Newell Drive cannot be extended north as it's proposed under the alignment. Well, then the only other way to move vehicles through would be down Watson Lane. And the EIR recognizes that there's lots of impacts associated with that, but in order to either consider or eliminate an option, you have to analyze it and describe it. So that's what this section here does. There is I don't know if you've been out to Watson Lane, but as you drive down there, it's narrow. And as you approach the railroad, you kind of have to kind of rises up suddenly. And so if this were to become a viable collector roadway, there would need to be a lot of improvements made to that railroad crossing and the road itself. And so at this point, I think it's you're probably ready for a change of voice, and we're lucky here to have Jesse.
Hi, thank you, Director Cooper. Hi, Vice Chair and Commissioners. I'm Jesse Vorenberg from Rincon Consultants, an environmental planner for this project. So we analyze the annexation project under CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. This applies to all projects that require discretionary approval from the state or a local lead agency, such as the city. EIR is the environmental impact report, is the highest and most comprehensive level of CEQA review. For this EIR and EIRs generally, they represent the kind of worst case scenario in terms of environmental impacts. The CEQA process also gives an opportunity for public discourse and disclosure of environmental impacts. Purpose of this meeting. The EIR includes mitigation measures that are designed to minimize, reduce, or avoid environmental impacts of the worst case scenario that is analyzed within the EIR. The CEQA process also allows us to look at alternatives to the proposed project description and look at what is the most environmentally superior alternative. I won't get into all of the details of this graphic, but this gives you an overview of what the CEQA process looks like. We are currently approaching the tail end of the CEQA process. We have submitted the draft EIR for public review, and we're currently in the public review period that's concluding tomorrow. After the public review period finishes, the city will begin preparing the final EIR that takes into account comments from the public. So the environmental analysis in the EIR looks at a number of different topic areas, really ranging all the way from aesthetics to wildfire, everything you see on the screen. EIR structure, the environmental impact report, is generally structured starting with an introduction and summary that really, dives into the project at a more summary level. The project description looks at project objectives as well as existing conditions, and gives an overview of the project. And then there's really the meat of the EIR, which includes each of the topic areas on the previous slide. Look at the environmental setting, the regulatory setting, as well as impacts in terms of quantifiable significance thresholds. And when impacts are found to be significant, we can assign mitigation measures that reduce the impacts to the extent that's feasible. There's also the alternatives section, as Director Cooper spoke about. Then it's notable that this EIR is a programmatic EIR. It's not an EIR for a specific development proposal. It doesn't analyze, not looking at site plans of something that is going to be built. It looks at a series of connected actions to govern future activities and decisions instead of that one development proposal. So some milestones under CEQA for this project. The notice of preparation was issued back in September 2022. That started the public input process for the project. Shortly following that was a scoping meeting. When the public review period under the notice of preparation ended in October, the city started preparing the draft EIR, which was published for public review last month on March 14th. And the public review period closes tomorrow. To provide some environmental context on the project before diving into the results of the draft EIR itself, this is the 6th EIR prepared for this portion of American Canyon within the past 8 years. For these projects up on the screen, past EIRs have identified air quality and greenhouse gas emissions, biological resources, airport land use compatibility, traffic, and water supply as significant impacts. So for the draft EIR for the annexation project, the city analyzed all topical issues from that previous slide, those 20 issue areas, except for mineral resources and schools, which falls under the public services topic. There are 34 mitigation measures in the draft EIR to reduce impacts to the extent feasible. I'm not going to go into all those mitigation measures in detail. I'm happy to answer questions about them during Q&A though. But mitigation measures are for impact areas like aesthetics, air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, geology and soils, greenhouse gas emissions, hazards, hydrology, noise, public services, and wildfire. And there's a big range of mitigation measures since the site plans for future development on the annexation area are unknown at this time. So in terms of the overall findings, there were no significant and unavoidable impacts. All impacts were mitigatable with those 34 mitigation measures to reduce impacts to a less than significant level, or they didn't require mitigation at all. In terms of the 4 project alternatives evaluated, the draft EIR is looking for the environmentally superior alternative that also achieves project objectives. So the draft EIR found that while the no project alternative is the environmentally superior, it doesn't achieve any of the project objectives, while the reduced build out alternative achieves project objectives and is the most environmentally superior. Thank you. Pass it back to Director Cooper.
Thanks, Jesse. We wanted to just kind of let everybody know that for purposes of this workshop and comments on the environmental impact report, it is necessary that we receive them in writing. I know that we have an opportunity here for the public to provide their input and oral comments. The practical matter is it's the words from somebody need to become in writing as opposed to another person transcribing or interpreting what someone might say from a microphone. So just wanted to make that clear that we're certainly welcome input, but it would need to be sent to us in writing. So we do have a slide here on how to submit comments. We have email to our planning consultant, Sean, who's online, and thank you, Sean. We have a website link. Thank you, Nicole. And we also have a QR code. I think that might also be Nicole as well. And then regular mail, too, for traditionalists. So in terms of the next steps, as Jesse mentioned, the next step would be to complete the public comment period. There is an effort that's made to review every comment and provide a written response. Those responses are then sent back to each individual that made them at least 10 days before it's brought back to this body for consideration. The City Council is the approval authority for the environmental impact report, and along with the environmental impact report, we'll match up and pair any amendments we have to the general plan and the zoning code. And so we also have a website for the project. Thank you, Nicole. And with that, that concludes our presentation. Yes, I imagine there might be some questions.
Thank you, Director Cooper. Commissioners, what are your questions? Okay, at this time, I open public comment. And our first speaker for today is Les Lawson and her representatives. Thank you. Lawson family.
Hi, my name is Ladina Ford. I'm speaking on behalf of my parents, Les and Erlene Lawson. They are Watson Lane residents. And there's two issues they asked me to address with you today. One of them is the zoning, and the other one is alternative 4. And so in both issues, we did provide comments in writing. I tried to submit it to the website link you had there, and it didn't work last night. So I kind of recall that when you mentioned it. So I'll try again, but I send it to you directly, Nicole. I don't really want to go into too much detail on our comments because we did provide it in writing. I just really wanted to give you guys an overview. So in reference to the zoning, in 2019, there was a proposed zoning, and at that time, the front of my parents' property and the property next to them was zoned residential, and the back was zoned Paoli Light Industrial. And that actually went to the Planning Commission and to the City Council and was adopted in 2 different resolutions. And so we were kind of surprised when this one came out, and it has all of their property zoned as residential. And it really limits them doing any type of future development because, as we've seen, Zone D, and in the assumption in the environmental impact report, it won't allow any future residential development, and now there's no potential of any light industrial development. And considering that, I think the environmental impact report estimates that 80% of the parcels will be pre-zoned for a Paoli Light Industrial, and the number of acres that are actually involved in what the difference that I'm talking about in terms of the property behind where their homes are located is not a lot. So I don't think it would make a huge difference in the environmental impact report if it goes back to what was actually adopted by the city in 2019. So I think that pretty much includes like just a basic overview on the zoning. The other item is alternative 4. And we do realize that this is only an alternative. The best case scenario is the Newell Drive extension and having an overpass, because that's really, and then at some point having it go all the way down to, I think Jamieson Canyon Road at some point is, am I done with time?
30 seconds.
Oh, okay. Well, if my sister comes up here, can she finish? Basically, I guess the big highlight I want to point out is right on Watson Lane. To the very right, there's 40 feet from Watson Lane is a lead switch. And sometimes a train is parked in front of Watson Lane for 5 to 15 minutes, and you can't go past it because they're switching cars. The railroad personnel have to get out of the train, get down, switch the track, get back in, they move the cars around, and then it goes back. So there's 4 to 6 trains that may go across this track each day that we are aware of. It might be more, it might be less. It can block the road for 5 to 15 minutes. So using this road can cause a lot of potential issues because we already have issues with cars going around Paoli Loop, big trucks coming down the road because of the Green Island Road. And so you could potentially have cars backed up all the way down the road, backed up around Paoli Loop, and backed up on the freeway.
Thank you for your comment. Can you please wrap it up?
So we just would ask you that if you, for some reason, have to choose an alternative, that you do not choose alternative 4.
Thank you very much.
Can I add my opinion?
Yes, and for the record, can you go ahead and please state your name?
My name is Les Lawson, 260 Watson Lane. My concern is with the widening of the road, you're going to take out 2 leach lines in my sewer system. But I got to thinking about that. That's probably a good deal, because years ago, the city gave me a letter that said they're going to put sewer on Watson Lane. So I know that when you take my leach field out, I'll just call up Public Works and say, hey, identify that sewer line, because I want to hook into it. It's not there. So something happened. They didn't put it in. They told me they did. They gave me a letter, and I sent it to the county so I could build a house. We don't have no sewer. What do you think? Do you think it's a good deal or bad deal? So I'm really disappointed that we come to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Are there any other speakers?
I know you didn't fill out your card or whatever, I'm really sorry, but my name's Sam Clarice and I live on Watson Lane.
I'm sorry, could you repeat your name?
Oh, my name is Sam Clarice and I live on Watson Lane. I have 2 parcels there, and I've lived there all my life. And I'd just like to say that my mom used to complain all the time about us paying more water bill price than American Canyon because we weren't in the city. I have no problem with being annexed to the city, but I don't want to pay a dime. I don't want to pay my fair share for anything. I'm not asking to go in the city. You want me to go in the city, but you don't want to provide sewer services down my street. I basically don't feel that I really want to go in the city. So no services. I think that maybe you should keep the zoning at commercial or industrial. I think residential estate is wrong. I don't think there's going to be people that want to live around Quinlan's Tires and the porta potties. And I think you kind of should keep it all residential and change the zoning back the way it was. If you want everybody to annex into the city, then run some services down the road and provide the hookups that you would charge anybody else here in American Canyon. For the inconvenience and everything, I would probably even ask for free hookups. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. And as far as the understanding of Alternative 4, from what I understand, that the development doesn't have the money to come down Newell Drive and come over with the bridges or the overpasses. And so if they don't have that money, then they think they want to come down Watson Lane, which is more, I guess, cost effective. But I tell you what, they want to take 30 feet of the roadway from the side of the roadway all the way up. And that would be a lot of trees and stuff that my grandmother and grandfather planted. And I wouldn't like that, and I wouldn't want that to happen. And I don't think that anybody under the circumstances would want that to happen to them either. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comments?
Fran Lemus. I was under the impression that that road was going to come into South Kelly Road. Was I not aware of that? That's my understanding. It was going to come into South Kelly Road just to get them off the highway. So you're actually saying they're going to come out of Paoli Loop and go on the highway. Is that correct?
Well, Vice Chair Cruz, let me, the city doesn't have property in its jurisdiction between Paoli's property and South Kelly Road. That's in the county. Today, there is an application in the county for an industrial project that would construct an extension of Newell Drive from South Kelly down to the Paoli property.
I thought that's because of Hess Vineyard or something.
That's correct.
Is that not going to happen?
That's in the county, and they're processing that. I don't have an updated status on it.
So why would you have that and this at the same time? It seems to me that we need to go to South Kelly Road and leave Watson Lane alone.
Thank you, Fran. Are there any other public comments? Are there any comments on Zoom?
If you are on Zoom and would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand. There are no comments on Zoom.
At this time, I close public comment. Commissioners, what are your comments and/or questions? Commissioner Altman.
All right. I've got a few questions, comments, et cetera. Brent, if you can, there's one parcel, and I appreciate you commenting about that triangular piece on the west side, that's already in the city. There's a piece on the east side that that's excluded, but that in some of the pictures and whatnot has some buildings on it. Is that already in the city, or is that something different? Yeah, right here, that's a good one. It's that piece outside on the far right.
Let me get my high-tech pointer.
Yeah, there you go. North of Watson Lane, you got it. Is that in the city already, or what's the story on that?
Yes, Commissioner Altman, that property was annexed into the city along with Watson Ranch.
Got it. Okay, so that what's in the yellow will just kind of fill in the missing
Yeah, there's
pieces.
kind of a, yeah, the city surrounds the property on 3 sides.
Got it. Got it. Okay, thank you. That was my first, wanted to just be clear that I understood what was where. Next, having looked at a number of EIRs and knowing that you have to come up with the alternatives, I guess my comment is the alternatives are there because they have to be there. They're not something that I think we are or want to actually be focused on. So just to, kind of hopefully ease anybody's concerns, it's a process that you have to, in order to evaluate, you've got to compare it to certain things. And the alternatives are those certain things to use as a comparison. And I think that there is no one around here who would want to see Watson Lane, if they've ever driven on Watson Lane, and I have on more than one occasion, who would want to see the comments from the residents are spot on. Trying to widen that road to make it a collector road would not be a pretty sight. So I just want to kind of hopefully put people's minds at ease kind of on that issue. But after hearing the comments about the sewer line, it's a question that I've got is, I don't know what was promised in the past, but as part of the annexation process, is it safe to assume that the residents on Watson Lane will be getting the city services, will have sewer lines installed? Not necessarily first thing, hey, it's annexed, now go put a sewer line in, but as funds become available and so on, that sewer lines would be part of, or is that a separate piece? Because I don't know.
Sewer lines aren't really my expertise. I'm not sure if Ron Renata might have some. There has been correspondence with some of the residents on this topic from our Public Works Director, Erica Smithies, who unfortunately isn't here. So I can give you a thimble of what was answered through secondhand information. And if I say anything egregious, Ron probably would catch me. So here it goes.
Okay.
I'm going to do my best. Okay, so sewer lines have the opportunity to be installed when property is in the city. The city doesn't have a bag of money to just put sewer lines anywhere. Typically, the way in which infrastructure is built today, it's constructed by applicants, and so with respect to sewer lines on an existing Watson Lane roadway, has an opportunity, once it's been annexed, how that's funded, under what conditions, I can't tell you, and I'm not sure the Public Works Director could either, but it is something that could be considered and worked through once the property is in the city.
Got it. So whether it be some sort of new impact fee on development outside of that area or within that area, whatever, that could be used to help fund. Okay.
I think Ron might agree there are a variety of ways in which infrastructure is funded.
Got it. No, I appreciate that, because, I mean, it's a valid issue, I think, that's being raised by the residents in that area.
Right. So as long as it's in the county, then it's not in the city.
Right. Right. If it's county, then have the county go put the sewer lines in, and the county's obviously not going to. So.
Can I talk for a second?
What, are we open? I'm fine.
At this time, we'll reopen public comment.
This will be quick and easy. In 2015, anyway, we were going to build a house on Watson Lane. And before I applied for a permit, I talked to the Public Works Director at the time, and I said, I don't want to upgrade my sewer system if the city's going to put sewer line down Watson Lane. It's foolishness. So he says, let me check into it. So he talked to the city council, and they approved the money, and they were going to go ahead and do it, and they gave me a letter to take to the county so I could build my house without changing my sewer system. So that was a home run to me, but it never happened. And I tried to find out where the money went, why someone stopped it, and I haven't got the answers yet. I've tried, but I haven't got it. So it just isn't right. They can put the sewer line down Watson Lane if it's still in the county. That should not enter in the judgment, as far as I'm concerned, as long as people are willing to pay for the hookup and whatever. So I don't know what else to tell you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Public comment still open. Anybody else? At this time, I close public comment.
Okay, so I will continue, and just, you know, my take is that this is a long overdue, and I'm thrilled that we're at the point that we are considering the annexation. I believe it should be part of the city, but I do believe that the residents in the area need to be treated with respect, not as second-class citizens. And I think you know, that's where my focus would be, is just making sure that everything is done as we go through this process to take care of people who have lived, and I think most of the residents out there have been in their homes for a long time. So I think that's critically important, and that's what I got for you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Altman. Commissioner Goff.
I also just want to follow up with what Commissioner Altman said. You know, option 4 is really nobody's desire. I think across the board, anybody, but it had to be in there. It had to be investigated, as Director Cooper mentioned. I think there will be significant benefit to the residents of Watson Lane once they are welcomed into the city as part of the city. That will allow the city to really take some actions on the things that you're talking about while you're still remaining in the county. It's not ours. We don't have that ability. So I think welcoming the residents of Watson Lane and that entire piece of land into the city will be beneficial for both the city, for future growth, for future opportunities, but also for the residents of Watson Lane who have been right there, essentially in American Canyon for a very, 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 very long time. As a matter of fact, really the original American Canyon. And this will give an opportunity for the city to welcome you in where you should have been probably all along, and for us to work to making sure that your homes and properties are treated with the respect and needs that all the other homes in the city of American Canyon are. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Goff. Commissioner Mohammed, do you have a comment? Okay, so it should be noted for the record that the Powley-Watson Lane Annexation Draft Environmental Impact Report has been received and filed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Cooper. Next item for business will be the fiscal year 2023-24 Capital Improvement Program.
Hello, good evening. Can you folks hear me okay? Yes, all right. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ronald Renata. I am a senior civil engineer with the Public Works Department. I am here on behalf of our director, Erica Amon-Smithies, who regrettably can't be here tonight. Thank you for allowing us to bring this item before you. Tonight, what we're bringing before you is because of the California Government Code Section 65401, it is required that capital improvement programs be consistent with and conform to general plans. Furthermore, Section 65402 requires consistency determination when property must be acquired to implement a CIP, or capital improvement program. These sections require the general plan conformance determination be made by the applicable planning agency. That would be you folks. So for the City of American Canyon, the Planning Commission is the designated planning agency. Accordingly, the Planning Commission is requested to review the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 CIP and determine whether the CIP activities are in conformance and consistent with the general plan. Simply as an example, a general plan consistency and conformity can be described as furthering the eventual achievement of goals, policies, and infrastructure identified in the general plan. So for example, construction of a roadway would be consistent with the general plan if the roadway is depicted on the circulation element, identified in the goals and policies, or listed as an implementation program or activity. To that end, staff evaluated the proposed FY 2023-24 capital improvement projects for consistency with the classifications contained in the general plan, and this is shown in attachment 2 in the agenda item. And so staff recommends the Planning Commission find these activities are consistent with and in conformity with the policies contained in the general plan. Following the Planning Commission's decision on the 2023-2024 CIP's consistency with the general plan, the CIP would be brought to the City Council for adoption, along with the anticipated expenditures and projects over a 5-year period, and this will hopefully be during a meeting in June of this year. So just to briefly recap the projects that are in the CIP, attachment 2, up on the slide there. So you see here we have various divisions, such as civic projects, parks and rec, public works, streets and transportation, water, wastewater, recycled water, and the list currently contains 37 projects. To break that down a little bit further, of those 37 projects, 24 projects are currently already budgeted in the current fiscal year, I believe that means that last year it would have been on the list that would have been brought to you. And so there are only really 13 new projects proposed in the fiscal year 2023-2024. And these include 8 park maintenance and improvement projects, 2 transportation projects, 2 water projects, and 1 recycled water project. And with that, I open it up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, so we now open up to the commissioners. What are your questions? No questions? At this time, I open public comment. Nicole, are there any comments on Zoom?
There are no comments on Zoom.
At this time, I close public comment. Commissioners, your comments, if any? There being none, I ask for a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to adopt the resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of American Canyon, California, determining that the City of American Canyon fiscal year 2023-24 capital improvement program is consistent and in conformity with the City of American Canyon general plan.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Altman?
Aye.
Commissioner Goff?
Aye.
Commissioner Mohammed?
Aye.
Chairman Lauria is absent. Vice Chair Cruz?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to management and staff oral reports. We have on our item that is active planning projects. Director Cooper.
I mean, the most important are still here. And this is the fun stuff.
Yeah, we have a lot of exciting projects. I'll just go through the highlights of what's happening in the Community Development Department and our development partners in Public Works. On the first page, item 3, we have a new application submitted since your last meeting for 2 amphitheaters at the Napa Valley Ruins. One is nestled in the Quarry Lake for a stunning atmosphere of a setting, and the second one is a smaller one with flexible space in one of the ruins buildings. So American Canyon is going to become kind of a new hip place and perhaps a bit highbrow as we go north of us. Maybe we'll all get berets or something. On the second page, yes, perhaps all right, well then maybe an ascot.
Maybe bucket hats.
Let's see, and then we have Bell Products, a fine company in Napa that is looking to build a new facility here in American Canyon. I think it'll be ready for your next meeting, so we're really excited to bring that one to conclusion. A couple spots down, the Promontory Watson Ranch, that's 216 single-family homes with an accessory dwelling unit option on the ground floor. So that's the first of its kind we've seen, and we've made a lot of progress with that project. I don't think it'll be ready for your next meeting, but maybe June. It's coming up soon. So that's property that's owned by the Newell family within AC1. And that project comes with a large park dedication. On item 15, the Watson Ranch specific plan amendment, there's some tuning up for the plan. It was originally adopted in 2019, and there's just some kinks to work out and refinements, and so that would come to the Planning Commission. I think there's not a whole lot that we have left to do, apart from a couple issues that Bill needs to answer.
Yes.
Let's see, the residences at Napa Junction, that project is going to have, gosh, an SEIR. It's a thank you, supplemental EIR. So you will get to hear all about that in a similar workshop to this as we go through the process. Essentially, there is enough unique circumstances with the property to warrant supplementing the original environmental impact report because it's within the Broadway district, which has an EIR. Some wetlands and historic resources and a couple other things. So that'll all be analyzed in this supplemental environmental impact report. So it's probably a lot like a regular one, but thinner. Moving on to construction, we actually do have construction permits for the Hampton Inn Hotel. They're administered by our Public Works Department, and they're called improvement plans, and that has to do with all the underground grading and utilities. And that's a step that's important before they submit their building permit application. So really excited to see that move forward. That came to us beginning in January, and Public Works has already provided comments. And I believe William also has a role there as well. There's a variety of mitigation measures that's needed to be addressed before grading and improvement. So we're working on that. Item 5, the SDG 217 warehouse building. This was a project that was reviewed by the Planning Commission, I think in 2020. And then it was appealed by an organization. The appeal was ultimately dropped after an extended period of time. And now the permit is issued. So this is a warehouse on Commerce Court, west side of town. There are 3 parcels. The first one, of course, has a completed warehouse. This is bookending the northern end of that vacant property, and then there's room for one more warehouse yet to be proposed in the middle. So for those that have been on the commission a long time, if you wonder what happens after you approve something, we get to tell you about it 3 years later. Let's see. I can say here on, let's see, we do have, let's see, was an ordinance and a general plan amendment recently at the Planning Commission on emergency shelter and accessory dwelling unit that was approved by the City Council for second reading just a couple days ago. So that's nice to have that completed. There is a new ordinance that will amend our neighborhood preservation ordinance. It's not the zoning code, so it doesn't come to the Planning Commission. But this was an initiative that was proposed by the Napa Youth Council, high school students in Napa and American Canyon, and they've advanced the idea that the city should adopt an ordinance to prohibit smoking in multifamily settings. And so we have an ordinance that's going to be going to the City Council its next meeting on May 2nd. So hats off to the students, making the world a better place. And we've crafted an efficient ordinance to accomplish what they're hoping to achieve. They have approached the council on a couple of times in the past, and we didn't move forward with it because we were busy with other policy initiatives, but we found some time to sort of fit this in. We are hopefully getting close to wrapping up our housing element. We've done a lot of work to prepare a response to the state's review. I think that should be ready to send to them, package up. There's a lot of analysis and work to answer their questions. Among them, what effect does our infrastructure standards have on affordable housing? Please explain all of your infrastructure standards and evaluate how that affects affordability. That's one example. So there's a lot of work and detail going into answering some of these questions. Now that we're getting some of these things behind us, we'll be able to resume work on the comprehensive general plan. We do have a draft EIR. We're administratively reviewing that and getting that out of the way. So we're really looking forward to getting back on some of these important things that we're all looking forward to doing. And thank you for the annual general plan review. If you have a chance to read it, you'll really see that there's been an awful lot accomplished in the last year. We're going to be, from now on, pairing that with our annual housing element update. So we kind of take care of them the same time. In terms of regional efforts, understand that there is environmental review has begun for the Highway 29 multimodal plan, affectionately known as the PID plan. And so that's going to take a couple of years, but it's coming along. I had forwarded some information as a follow-up to Commissioner Goff's questions on the countywide regional climate change. So they're working on different meetings, and there was I think an update with OSATs recently for the City Council subcommittee on that. And then I'm part of the Napa County Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. The county has allowed City of Napa and American Canyon to participate occasionally on meetings. And we had one last week, that was 2 weeks ago, that was really interesting. And it may come as no surprise to people who are familiar with the technology and the science that goes into these zones. If you take a look at the new future plans for the airport, as I understand it, and the noise contours created from that, the D zone would move north from where it is today. And surprisingly, the consultants didn't propose any change to the D zone in American Canyon. But so I kind of had my hand up and asked about that. So we'll be writing some comments about that. But they did seem open to, it's not to moving it perhaps where it should be. So that's really good news. It helps free up property. There's a housing crisis. If there is no, in fact, noise impact, then let's act like there is. It's kind of our perspective. So we'll see how far that gets us. And that's my update for you. If you have any questions, anything else going on around town that's you'd like to ask about, happy to answer.
Great, thank you, Director Cooper. A lot of exciting things happening here in our city. Very excited. Before I open up and close it out and give, of course, other commissioners a chance to say something, there's two very special people's birthday today. First, I want to wish my daughter, Cassandra Cruz, happy birthday. Daddy loves you. Hope you had a special day today. And
Wow.
of course, another special person, our city attorney, Mr. Bill Ross. Happy birthday, sir.
Thank you.
And we all got together and got a card.
Oh, thank you, Bert.
And after the meeting is after the meeting is closed, somebody baked a cake.
Any other comments by the commissioners?
Yeah, 10 years short of Ron's time here.
Yeah, 10 years. Ron was here though, when the door was open. Ron was here.
All right, well, that wraps it up. It is 8:21. I call this meeting adjourned.